I have already said this 100 times, but if Europe suddenly wants to fight with us and starts, we are ready right now.
Russia is a country at war, but it is not only fighting against Ukraine, it is also fighting within itself.
Russia is a leading country where the number of women significantly exceeds the number of men.
Let's focus on the cries coming from the heart of Moscow.
Give us back our husbands! Stop your war!
Now look, in these scenes you see at the beginning, the families of Russian soldiers are crying out in the face of the state's indifference. Graves decorated with flowers, waving Russian flags. These are soldiers sacrificed to Vladimir Putin's ambition. But those lying there are not just numbers to Russians. They are sons, husbands, and fathers. Russians are now on the brink of a major uprising, saying, "Enough is enough!" While the Kremlin is turning to exploiting even the poorest regions to fill the budget, growing unrest in the streets is turning into rebellion. Explosions are not just lighting up Moscow's skyline, but also burning television screens miles away. In Rostov, angry mothers set fire to the military commissariat.
People, how long can we be robbed? We are being openly and brazenly robbed, all of us.
In Kazan, protests against electricity price hikes turned into "No to war" slogans, and in Dagestan villages, a flood of coffins triggered calls for autonomy. Even the refrigerators of the low-income class in Buryatia have been seized by the army. The situation is that dire. Amid all this chaos and unrest, the voice coming from the Kremlin carries a great deal of irony. Putin is trying to maintain his leadership illusion by gathering with volunteers, but at the same time, he is creating panic by issuing threats. Putin has once again threatened to launch a full-scale war against all of Europe, saying that if he does so, nothing will remain.
I have already said this 100 times, but if Europe suddenly wants to fight with us and starts, we are ready right now.
He implies that his 11-year war against Ukraine is not a failed attempt to conquer a sovereign neighboring country, but rather that he has not even started a real war yet. Tell that brazen claim to the 1,175,030 Russian soldiers who have been eliminated and to their graves in the mud. So, what was Vladimir Putin's response? On October 1st, 2025, Putin signed the largest autumn conscription decree in the last 9 years. A full 135,000 new young men are being forcibly drafted. The people want peace, Putin says. More soldiers. This is no longer a difference of opinion between a leader and his people. This is a new internal front opened by a leader against his own people. And this is pushing Russia into the darkest period of its modern history. The deafening sound of sirens echoing across the country is no longer connecting the Kremlin to the streets. It is connecting the streets to each other. Every alarm sounds like a drumbeat of rebellion. Every explosion further eroding the myth of the invincible state. Where will this chain of collapse break? In the 8th month of 2025, the Kremlin budget had a deficit of 3.7 trillion rubles. This figure represents a budget gap of a magnitude almost unheard of in Russian financial history outside of times of war. As the cost of the war in Ukraine rises with each passing month, military spending is skyrocketing. Energy revenues are declining due to global price fluctuations and sanctions. The ruble, meanwhile, cannot stop its decline in value. Thus, Moscow's coffers are emptying rapidly, struggling to bear the burden of the war. The Kremlin's solution to close this gap has been to reach into the pockets of citizens at the lowest levels of society. Buryatia, one of Siberia's poorest regions, already has a fragile socio-economic structure with low income levels, limited production capacity, and high unemployment rates. But in recent weeks, local authorities and volunteer networks have launched campaigns to collect supplies directly from the public to support the army. Announcements made in the Zagrayevsky region requested donations of refrigerators to be sent to field hospitals at the front lines. However, the list of requests quickly expanded to include basic humanitarian needs, such as motorcycles, clothing, wheelchairs, canes, and even drinking water. A small number of people voluntarily handed over their remaining working refrigerators and other usable items. But this scene attracted attention not only because of the material aid it provided, but also because of the message it conveyed. Local residents interpret the state and military's inability to meet even the most basic logistical needs with their own resources as a sign of deep failure in both economic management and war preparedness. The situation in Buryatia is being replicated almost exactly in other regions of Russia. In Irkutsk, the local administration suspended bonus payments to a wide range of people, from teachers to cultural workers, public officials and educators, and transferred these funds directly to the army's needs. Although official statements say that these cuts are temporary, there is talk behind the scenes that they could continue indefinitely. A teacher's account clearly illustrates the scale of the situation. They said there was no money left for the SWO, that all resources had been exhausted. Since soldiers couldn't be paid, they deducted a significant amount from our salaries. In the Komi Republic, demands have taken a different turn. Authorities have requested that the public donate fishing nets to be sent to the front lines. It is stated that soldiers will use these nets to cover trenches, build temporary shelters, or provide camouflage. Thus, the assistance requested from the public is not limited to basic needs such as food or clothing. It extends to engineering and defense materials that will be used directly on the battlefield. At Bauman State Technical University in Moscow, the impact of the war economy has manifested itself in a more creative but equally controversial way. The university administration has offered students physical education credits in exchange for knitting camouflage nets. This practice amounts to a direct exchange of academic achievement for the production of war materials. Thus, the needs of the front lines are now being met not only by factories or volunteer workshops, but also by university campus curricula. What is striking is that the increasing economic and social pressures have completely transformed the public's motivation to donate. Those who enthusiastically supported the invasion of Ukraine in the early stages of the war and sent money to the front lines had increased their donations nearly fourfold by 2025. But this time, the driving force was not Kremlin propaganda, but the harsh conditions and humanitarian concerns faced by soldiers on the front lines. In other words, the purpose of donations has become less about supporting a political cause and more about helping relatives, friends, or neighbors survive. However, even this voluntary aid is far from solving the deepening problem. The people see that the cost of the war is constantly being placed on their shoulders as their living standards rapidly decline. Prices for everything from basic food items to transportation are rising, while wages are eroding in real terms. Public services such as health and education are deteriorating, and transportation infrastructure is crumbling. This situation is fueling growing silent anger and unrest, especially in low-income areas. Moreover, this anger is not solely driven by material concerns. Mothers who send their children to war also bear the heavy burden of financing this war. In Dagestan, where soldiers' funerals followed one after another, meetings were held under the banner of local autonomy, and the issue was quickly brought to the official agenda of the regional parliament. In Tatarstan, an imam said in his sermon, "If the capital declares war and sends the bill to the peasants, this is not justice." As a result, an investigation was launched against him by the Ethnic Policy Committee. Every time budget allocations are cut, discontent grows in the provinces. When the center's power weakens, the periphery becomes reluctant to recognize authority. The anger on the streets erupted in Novosibirsk at the end of July. 3,800 people who participated in the Enough is Enough march were dispersed within the first 15 minutes by water cannons firing colored water. Memorial chains were formed in 19 cities with black balloons in their hands and the slogan, "Give me back my son," on their lips. In Perm, crowds protesting a 25% increase in the price of bread quickly switched to chanting, "No to war." Police offered those arrested two options: a fine of 600,000 rubles or voluntary deployment to the front lines. Finding men without passports in the city was nearly impossible. Most had left the country months earlier via Georgia or Kazakhstan. The losses were no longer just statistics, they had become a pain deeply embedded in people's homes. According to independent sources, the number of Russian soldiers killed, seriously injured, or missing between February 2022 and July 2025 reached 1.05 million. This meant that 1 in every 4 households in the country had a black ribbon hanging from their door. According to a report by demographer Pavel Yelizarov, between 970,000 and 1,040,000 soldiers had completely lost their combat effectiveness during the same period. While official figures still insisted on 45,000 casualties, the reality of the graves was undeniable. The Independent Civil Initiative last address identified 132,000 new military grave markers ordered between April and June, based on data from marble workshops. This equated to an average of 1,450 deaths per day. Local newspapers in villages now print obituaries on extra pages, while in cities the question, "Why the war?" is spray-painted on neighborhood walls. While state television broadcast headlines about heroic defenders of the homeland, mothers on telegrams still whispered the same words. The zinc box arrived, we couldn't see his face. Nevertheless, 350,000 people were called up in an accelerated draft to make up for the new losses. But the confirmed number did not even reach 50,000. Instead of long queues in front of the provincial police headquarters, there are silent voids. Young people rush from the passport line to the Georgian border, the Mongolian steppe, or the Helsinki bus station. According to reports, over the past 9 months, 310,000 conscripts have crossed the borders of Georgia, Finland, Kazakhstan, and Turkey, illegally. Mobile border data shows that 22% of Russian citizens intend to leave the country. It is now the norm for families to wait at the door with their passports, cash, and digital wallets at the ready. An anonymous report from border guards says that over 120,000 people have declared their intention to leave the country permanently since the end of May. This brings the total number of war refugees to 1.3 million. The defense industry cannot find workers to replace the young men who have left, leaving production lines idle. The official unemployment rate still stands at just 7.3%, but this figure masks the employment illusion created by the war. The recruitment of military contract personnel has topped the list of most sought-after professions in Russia's open labor market database for the first time. Salary promises of up to 500,000 rubles are splashed across posters to lure young people from poor regions into the barracks. But for those who know the truth, these advertisements are often synonymous with two signs seen side by side on the same street. One is a banner recruiting soldiers, the other is an advertisement for a coffin manufacturer. In the civilian sector, the picture is even bleaker. The disruption of the supply chain for Western technology components has crippled production. In the past month alone, 1,100 medium-sized factories have closed down. The 68,000 people laid off in the automotive sector formed long lines in front of tax offices. Applications for temporary social credit hit a record high. The consumer front is also experiencing a severe downturn. In the neighborhood markets of the Leningrad Oblast, the price of a kilogram of potatoes has reached 90 rubles. Pensioners are calculating whether they can afford to buy bread when they go to the pharmacy to get their prescription drugs. The subsidized smart credit card project, which the government has begun to talk about, is being described as a QR code version of the coupon books of the 1990s. The crisis is not limited to income and consumption. The country's skilled human resources are also rapidly dwindling. Since the beginning of June, 47 rural health centers have hung signs saying, "Temporarily closed," due to a shortage of doctors. In some areas, the nearest dental clinic is 300 kilometers away, and a farmer writhing in toothache expresses his anger, saying, "Did I not have my teeth pulled to win the war?" Middle-class families are paying large sums of rubles to consulting firms operating along the Turkey-Armenia-Serbia route to send their children abroad. Demographic indicators are revealing one of the harshest reflections of social collapse. The birth rate dropped by 7% in 2024. In the first quarter of 2025, the decline reached 12%. Reports from maternity clinics confirm that expectant mothers are unwilling to raise children in an environment of economic uncertainty and social unrest. Thus, the economic crisis is quietly consuming not only the present, but also the future of the country. The wave of emigration is no longer just the desperate flight of the poor. The richest segment of the country is also quietly packing their bags. As always, the elite made the first move. Oligarchs are withdrawing their assets from Russia by transferring them to Dubai-based offshore trusts. In the last 3 months, $15 billion has fled abroad unregistered. Luxury villas in Rublevka have fallen to half their price on real estate portals, but the market is still frozen. No one wants to tie their fortune to a house burning with rubles. The central bank is issuing warning after warning saying, "You are disrupting the balance of payments." But these warnings are not affecting the appetite of law firms or the determination of buyers. Deals are being struck behind the scenes, synchronized with private jet departure times. In the corridors of the capital, the same phrase is being whispered more and more frequently. If the ruble hits 160, even those who stayed will start looking for tickets. But after the attacks in June, 117,000 passports were issued in just 1 month. Queues of vehicles at the Georgian border crossed 35 kilometers. Kazakhstan limited entries by imposing quotas on authorization visas. Even Armenia began discussing a cap on temporary residence applications on the grounds of preserving the male population balance. Andrei, 28, who left Barnaul, explained his decision in a short video posted on YouTube. "If I stay here, there are 2 possibilities, the front or prison. Exile is expensive, but if there is a price to pay for survival, I have chosen to pay it." All these developments are severely eroding the political image that Vladimir Putin has worked so hard to cultivate over the years. This is because Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine, which began in 2022, was presented as a historic mission and rebirth of the nation, thanks to the Kremlin's skillful propaganda in the early days. Victory songs were played on state television and Russian flags waved in the squares. But as time passed, the cost of the war became visible both on the front lines and within the country. As months turned into years, ammunition shortages, losses of armored vehicles and drones, and even the inability to provide basic medical supplies dealt a direct blow to Putin's image as an invincible leader. The collection of refrigerators, motorcycles, blankets, and even drinking water from the people in poor areas, and the forcing of university students in large cities to weave camouflage nets in exchange for tuition credits, led to questions about the state's military capacity. While Western media outlets have documented Russia's bottleneck in high-tech weapon systems and spare parts crisis due to Western sanctions, images leaked on social media have spread rapidly among the public, despite the Kremlin's strict control mechanisms. Once seen as the guarantor of stability and order, Putin now faces criticism as a leader who cannot even equip his own army. This erosion of his image is narrowing the Kremlin's room for maneuver in domestic politics. As the living standards of the people are rapidly declining, the financial burden of the war is increasing day by day. Although this situation does not directly translate into victory for Ukraine, it does create a significant strategic advantage. Disruptions in the logistics chain on the front lines are eroding the Russian army's ability to carry out planned offensives and defenses. Ammunition supplies are delayed, armored units are immobilized while waiting for spare parts, and health and ammunition depots behind the front lines cannot be adequately supplied. The shortfall in the Kremlin's war budget is raising questions about its ability to finance long-term operations. This is buying Ukraine time and giving it the opportunity to use military and financial aid from the West in a more planned and effective manner. The Kremlin now has 2 remaining weapons: fear and the currency. Fear is fueled by tightened laws, police pressure, detentions, and long prison sentences, while the currency is temporarily managed by the central bank's reflex to print money. But both tools are like time bombs. The more fear is suppressed, the greater the pressure builds within society. The ruble's printed fuel inflation, and the money in people's pockets rapidly loses value. State television may say that everything is under control, but the empty shelves in supermarkets and constantly changing price tags send a clear message to citizens on the street: out of control. Air raid sirens have become a psychological barometer measuring the country's mood. Each alarm sounds like a hammer blow, eroding the ruble further and adding new cracks to the wall of people's patience. The fear fueled by the Kremlin's stick policy is backfiring like a chemical reaction. History has shown this cycle many times. In 1993, Yeltsin built fear by attacking parliament with tanks. But when the economy collapsed, that fear evaporated. Today, the economy is already evaporating, so the life of fear is much shorter. Russian history books contain the phrase, "The Russian uprising is a powerful phenomenon." But the picture for 2025, rather than whispering its meaning, screams it out loud. Bread is expensive, children are in the grave, the ruble is worthless, and drone sirens can be heard day and night. And past examples clearly show the outcome of this formula. In 1905, the first revolutionary uprising was suppressed with blood, but 12 years later, the empire collapsed. In 1989, the human chain of the Baltic peoples was isolated, but 2 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. Today, that chain is being rebuilt in any square with the screams of a mother, the rebellion of a soldier fleeing the front lines, and the rumble of hunger. The only difference this time is that the chain is breaking faster than ever before in history. What do you think about this? Your thoughts are very important to us, so please leave your comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.